My friends, what's up? Big Hush here. Before this video gets started, let's make it clear that Mountain Dew is not a sponsor of this video. I just prefer this beverage. After all these years, I finally decided to make a video touching a question that I've gotten many times. A lot of people ask, why do you sand the mask? Do you have to sand the masks? What's with sanding the masks? Do you have to prime the masks? Can't you just prime them? Why not just sand them and don't do primer? Different variations of that. Basically, why do you have to sand the masks? So I've got two masks, brand new, untouched. So we're gonna go through this. I've also got both ends of the spectrum on sandpaper. I've got 3,000 grit, I've got 60 grit. I wish it didn't have to be these giant sheets. This was all that Lowe's had when I went. It's obnoxious, I'm gonna have to tear them down. When you get these masks, they have a very shiny, non-stick type of surface on them, which is awesome as far as its smoothness and shininess. And yes, if you just painted this directly, the finish and the surface of it is very cool. But you're gonna find out why that's not the greatest idea by the end of this video. What sanding the mask does is it takes that super shiny, slick surface off of it. It roughs up the surface, gives paint something to stick to and adhere to. So what you want to do is sand the entire mask, rough it up a little bit. You've seen in my videos, I pretty much use 120 grit all the time. Back when I first started making these videos, I used like 60 or 80 or something. Basically, the higher the number, the finer the grit, and the less it's going to rough up your mask and your plastic. 3,000 is super fine grit. I know you can't tell through the video, but when I touch this, it's almost like touching cardstock paper or something. 60 is a totally different story. 60 is super rough, super gritty, and it'll tear up your mask. It'll shred it up, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. Early on, I did my texturing on my mask basically by using sandpaper. I'll just get 60 grit, go real rough, real hard to get that those scratches and that texture in there that now I do basically on the paint when I scratch, when I scrape with a knife, and I get that scratching effect. That's how I do that texture now. But when I first started, I was using sandpaper to do it. And so when you use a 60 grit paper, the result could be what you want, depending on what you want to do. By the way, here's a lizard hanging out with me. Alright, so here we go. We got a mask and we're going to do half 60 grit, half 3,000 grit. You see this shininess right here? That's what we're trying to get rid of. You want that to go away. So when I say sand the entire front of a mask in a video, I'm basically saying sand the entire front until you don't see this shine on the front. That's what you're trying to get rid of. Here we go. We got the 3,000 grit. And it's going to be hard for you to tell anything that's happening. I don't even know. I've never actually used 3,000 grit, so this will be a little experiment for me too. I swear it feels like I'm just rubbing cardstock across this thing. See how that shine's going away? See how only half of it's shining? That's how you know you've done good. Just keep on going. So if you want your mask to be as smooth as possible, if you're trying to make one that's not damaged and isn't torn up or doesn't have texture, looks like this would be the way to go. Alright, there we go. I've got this side sanded by 3,000 grit paper. See how only half of it's shining? And that took a little bit more work, to be honest. Because like I said, the lower the grit, the more aggressive the sandpaper is, so the quicker you're getting that sand job done. But now, here we go. We're going to do this side with 60 grit. The super gritty stuff. And you're going to hear it. Hear that? See how aggressive that is? To the naked eye, you probably can't see it on the camera, but I can see the scratches right here, but they'll stand out even more once you hit it with paint. That'll give them a little more definition. By the way, here's a lizard hanging out with me. So now I've sanded half the mask with 60 grit. See those lines? See how much it's torn up the plastic? I've also sanded it with 3,000 grit. See how much smoother that is? Alright, so now I've got that sanded down. The next step is to hit it with primer. And some of you ask, do you have to prime the mask? No, you don't have to. You don't have to do anything that you see me do in my videos if you don't want to, but I like it as added insurance. That's what I've always told you when I replied to you in the comments, is that I like the added insurance of having primer as well as sanding the mask down. Granted, a lot of these spray paints from Krylon and stuff are paint plus primer now. I don't know. I like having primer.
It's for the principle, it's for peace of mind. Jesus.
But also, in my mind, for some reason, every layer of paint that you can add to a mask just makes it seem more robust, even if it's just a thin layer of paint. I know that sounds silly. Some of you might know what I mean. Every layer of paint you add to it just gives it a little bit more, just a little bit something.
Remember, gang, the difference between ordinary and extraordinary is that little extra.
All right, let's throw some primer on this. Alright, so now we're throwing primer on there, and I'll show you the mask again just so you can really see it, because it kind of stands out more once you hit it with some primer. So we've got the mask primed up now. I'm going to let it dry. And speaking of which, I'll answer a question I get a lot as well. Do you let the paint dry between every layer? And yes, I give it at least 45 minutes, if not an hour or 2 hours, just depending if I end up, working on chores or doing an errand or something like that. Then the more the merrier. The drier it is, the better. But I always let every layer of paint dry before I go to the next one. Wait for the jet to stop ruining my shot. Alright, can you see me? What we're going to do here, I've got an untouched mask. I'm going to paint this. I'm going to paint it purple. Got our sanded mask. Going to paint it red. And then we'll see which surface is the best surface for your paint. Alright, here we go. Our masks are dry. As you can see, this side looks really nice, pretty smooth. This side still looks pretty rough. It would probably take a couple more layers of paint to properly cover it. You can see kind of these dark areas. And so the surface is totally different. Now we'll give it the thumbnail test again and see. So on the 60 grit side, thumbnail test. Pretty good. Some of the paint's coming off. There's a little bit of exposure there. But for the most part, it's staying on. So the paint's sticking really well on this side. Thumbnail test on the 3000 grit side. Definitely coming off in more places. If I dig in, can't seem to get a grip on my thumb. Not much happening. Now, I didn't do anything with this mask. All I did was paint it purple, straight out of the box. Look at that finish. The finish is awesome. But, let's try the thumbnail test. Index nail, I should say. Look at that. See how easy that comes off? Look at that. Like nothing. Scrape it off. No trouble at all. By the way, here's a lizard hanging out with me. So, the answer to the age-old question. Do you have to sand the mask? Should I sand my mask? My answer is yes. Your answer might be no. But as you see here, if you sand the mask with a lowish grit sandpaper, prime it, do all that, it's very hard to chip the paint and take that paint off. If you do it with a super high grit sandpaper, it's still not bad, it's protected. And if you just don't do anything, you take the mask straight out the box and spray paint it, you better be careful with this sucker, because it will take nothing to take your paint off. And that's the problem. I have painted a mask straight out of the box like this before, and I had no idea it was a problem until the paint chipped off. While I was working on it, while I was in the finishing stages, I just accidentally scratched it and a whole chunk of paint came off. That is why, in my opinion, always sand that mask. Do something to make that paint stick securely.
Opinions vary.
It's all about protecting your artwork. Now, I will admit that the finish on the mask, if you just paint it straight out of the box, is so dope. So it's extremely tempting to just paint the mask as is. I'm sure you can achieve this smoothness after sanding the mask as well. Obviously the 3000 grit sandpaper is something I'm going to consider now. Again, the answer to the question is yes and no, basically. I just hope this information is helpful in you making your decision while you be creative. Good luck on all your masks. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for subscribing. And if this video is helpful at all, please smash that like button. I hate using that phrase. I need something more original. Please crush that like button. Please obliterate that like button. It's all pretty lame. Please give that like button a tap. Hope everything's great in your world. Catch you in the next video. Peace! This lizard has scared the hell out of me no less than 5 times while filming this. FYI.